Welcome, everybody, to the Let Purple Rain podcast. Please like and subscribe. I'm your host, Joe Arpasi, otherwise known as Purple Rain. I started my CFF work in 2008, and after stepping away for 8 years, I returned in 2024 as Purple Rain. You can follow me on X at the handle you see on the screen. You can also find all of my content over at letpurplerain.com. I'd love here to welcome everybody to today's guest, Jeremy Miller. He is one half of the CFFLists team. You can find that podcast over at YouTube at CFFLists, and you can follow him on X at the handle that you see on the screen. I was fortunate to have met Jeremy at the 2024 Fantasy Football Expo, and lucky enough to have been able to have been a guest on your your podcast last season. I think twice I was a guest. Now I have you as a guest on my podcast. For everyone out there that aren't familiar with you, could you go over your history in CFF and your work in the industry?
Yeah. So, kind of taking the last part first. My partner Willie B and myself, were on Instagram a couple years ago and noticed nobody had the handle college fantasy football. So we said, wow, well, we've been doing college fantasy football since 2008. Running a 24-team league, and there's other pieces I'll mention that kind of might make us a little more qualified than just running a league. But we had been in it a long time compared to others that were just coming around and newer to it. We got the handle on Instagram for college fantasy football. Quickly realized that the audience was probably more likely to be on Twitter, and that's why there weren't many people on Instagram, that were in the fantasy football game. So we started there, though, still moved over to Twitter, where we grew much more rapidly, and met a lot more other people that had been in the industry. I guess we caught you in your hiatus period, but we were happy to meet you last year as one of the guys that really got the ball rolling on analyzing college fantasy football. It's kind of taken off from there. I love lists. I'm a stats major, kind of majored in business statistics at NYU. Whereas my partner, Willie B, he's coached high school football, nothing at a high level, but he's much more of a film guy and likes to watch guys move around and kind of analyze from that direction. So we just feel like together, we're pretty cohesive and kind of, sorting through, which guys should be ranked higher than others, based on the stats and, their performance and how they actually, produce on the field. It helps that I've had 3 boys that went on to play Division I football, and I'm blessed that they all got scholarships. So from that perspective, you could probably assume I've been much more involved in following college football than the average person. Although everybody that I think most everybody that gets into college fantasy is pretty serious about it. Otherwise, I don't think you jump in, because there is a little bit more work to do in terms of sorting through all the players and everything. But that's kind of it in a nutshell. We got the social media accounts going about 4 years ago. And because it had a little bit of traction, and I would be doing this anyways for myself, we felt like we would just keep offering it for the public to consume. And, fortunately, we get a few people bookmarking our stuff and retweeting our stuff and liking our stuff. So we appreciate those pats on the backs. It keeps us motivated during the deep off season to keep doing work that maybe our wives think we're crazy for doing, but otherwise we really enjoy. And like I said, we'd probably be doing anyways.
Yeah. And for anyone that has not watched their podcast over on YouTube, they're great to watch, especially during the season. They basically do many college fantasy drafts, but they're
Right.
all players that are
On the waiver wire.
yeah, thank you. Well, that should be available on the waiver wire.
Right.
And so it's a great resource each week at the start of your week to be identifying potential players, but then to also see when you have anywhere from 3 to 4 different people drafting a team, kind of like
Right.
who might be a higher priority, and help you set your priority list for waiver wires. And I had a fun time doing that on your show last year. I can't
Yep.
remember. I think I just missed the playoffs, or I lost in the first round. I don't remember which.
Yeah, I think you made it and lost in the first round. I keep our spreadsheet here with everything. I can go back and check later when you're talking. But it's fun. the first year, we had our social media accounts up and running, because everything we do is kind of graphic oriented since we started on Instagram. So that's kind of what separates us on Twitter is, we're not just text. We like to provide an image and a list, with everything that we're putting out there, hence the name, CFF Lists. But it was just a competition between Willie B and myself, that first year, because we were alone on Instagram doing it. But as we moved to Twitter, like I said, we found more analysts, breaking things down, and thought it would be a fun way to involve more people, and also to get people to retweet things that we were doing to kind of expand the audience. Had to use a little bit of business sense there, but we expanded it to a 4-person competition, which is really perfect because we all draft a quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, and a tight end. You have to be rostered on less than 30% of teams. So, even if one of us drafts a guy that might be taken in your league, there's 3 other guys drafting, at the different positions. So usually 3 or 4 of the 8 receivers or running backs are going to be available in just about every league. A lot of us take guys that are rostered on only 1 or 2% of teams because we're on them early, which is what everybody, fielding lineups wants. You want to, find guys that nobody has and nobody knows about. But yeah, making it a competition every week is great. We should figure out how to do that on one of the sites, like on Fantrax, and make it like a weekly competition the public can enter. I'm gonna have to put my mind to that, Joe.
I might help you out, and we can take a look at that and talk about it a little on the show here. I'm going to go ahead and make some announcements on my side of the table. Right. We are wrapping up April at letpurplerain.com. I'm continuing to provide you guys with news and fantasy stock report updates from spring camps across the country. This is the wrap-up show for the 7-part CFF Coaching Systems series, where we review some of the best offensive systems for specific type of fantasy players. I've had tons of amazing, great guests, just like Jeremy here. And I've been saying it the whole time, guys. I think this is an invaluable tool for your CFF drafts. You can find the entire series at letpurplerain.com. If you go into the description below, I have a link to each and every article where you can find the different videos, as well as being able to see the coach's historical stats. Transitioning to letting you guys know about what's going to be coming in May at letpurplerain.com. I am going to be doing a damaged goods spring camp injury recap. That will be the final item that I'm going to be reviewing for the spring session, and then I'm going to be diving headfirst into draft preparation from here on out. I'm going to be giving you guys articles on handcuffs. I'm going to be giving you guys articles on, a lot of people like to call them, not keepers, excuse me, like to call them sleepers. I kind of reclassify them in 2 subcategories. So I call them risers and flyers. I'm going to be doing all 4 position groups for risers and flyers, as well as nuclear options that are out there. And at the end of the month, I'll be doing a spring transfer portal update. Right now, it's in the air whether or not I'm going to do that as a podcast episode or a written article. I'm going to be on the road a lot over the end of the end of April and throughout May. I just don't know exactly where my time's going to be at the end of the month, guys. So at the very least, this will be the last podcast that you'll have for a month. Might be a little bit longer just if I'm getting really stretched coming back from the road. I'm also, though, extremely excited to bring you guys this special promotional event for this year. So go ahead and check out this video. Do you love college football? Do you love fantasy football? My name is Joe Arpasi, and I have just the thing for you. I'm the man behind LetPurpleRain.com, your premier college fantasy football resource. And I'm hosting a 52-man college fantasy football league. New world order. The winner of my league is going to take home this custom championship belt provided by this league's sponsor, armchampionshipbelts.com. If you want a chance to compete for this bad boy, go to letpurplerain.com and sign up to be a premium subscriber today. All premium subscribers are automatically entered into the drawing to see who makes this league, and I'm going to be running drawings from March all the way through July. That means the longer that you're a premium subscriber, the more chances you have to be entered into this 52-man challenge. Let me tell you something, brother. Winning this belt's not going to be easy. You're going to have to contend with the new world order of college fantasy football. You're not only going to be competing against me, you're going to be competing against Eric Froton from NBC Sports and FantasyPoints.com, Jared Palmgren from Chasing the Natty Podcast and CampusToCanton.com, and John McKechnie from RotoWire.com. So go sign up today to become a premium subscriber at LetPurpleRain.com so you have a chance to get a golden ticket to the show. You're not going to want to miss out on a chance to win this baby because this belt is just too sweet. I am so pumped to be hosting the 2025 Battle for the Belt 52-Man League Challenge. Special thanks to ArmChampionshipBelts.com for being this event's sponsor. I will be doing the third of 6 golden ticket giveaways live here on YouTube on Wednesday, May 7th. If you aren't already a premium subscriber, sign up now so you'll automatically be entered into these golden ticket giveaways. Also, check out my CFF apparel shop. I have a link in the description below. I've got short and long sleeve shirts, tons of color options, can koozies. You're going to find generic college fantasy football stuff as well as some Let Purple Rain based gear in there as well. Transitioning into talking about today's show, we are going to be reviewing the top CFF coaching systems for high-volume tight ends. YouTube will be the home of the preview show where we review the number 11 through 15 coaching systems, and LetPurpleRain.com will be the exclusive home to the top 10 coaching systems. For a coaching system to qualify, the coach's career average for a tight end 1 must average 4 targets per game or 48 targets over a 12-game season, and 30 yards per game, or 360 yards for a 12-game season. I rank these coaches by a combination of the career average fantasy points scored and the amount of seasons logged in the database. Coaches that have more years in their history get a bump up the rankings, vice versa for the coaches that don't have very many years. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's dive into some college fantasy football. One thing that needs to be said is that the tight end position battles are typically hard to get good reads on. And I'm going to admit, guys, the tight end position has been my weakest area to assess during the summers. I know Jeremy and I, we're going to be doing our best here by evaluating these position battles, the situations, and trying to give you the best insight we can. But I just wanted to throw that kind of, item out there that these are really tough typically to be getting a lot of news on over the summer.
I'll help you out there. I looked at our stats from last year's preseason rankings, so I can get a little more confidence in some of the information we give. So in our final rankings last year, 6 out of the final top 12 in points per game were in our top 14 to start the season. So we almost nailed 50% as far as some top 12, top 14 guys. Five of our preseason top 12 actually did finish in the top 12. So we almost got half of them, which I think for tight ends was a pretty good outcome there.
I agree. And I think this season's way harder than last year because there's a bunch of really good guys that have gone on to the NFL and tight ends. I was supposed to say, the turnover. I think tight end might be one of the hottest positions on the transfer portal because everybody needs them and there's only so many. So it's really making some of these situations tough to read. I'm going to get us started here with our number 15 coaching system. We have Garrett Riley, the offensive coordinator at Clemson. Players to keep an eye on are Olsen Pat Henry and Josh Sapp. In 3 of the 4 seasons of data that I have here for Garrett Riley, his tight end 1 has had at least 89 fantasy points, 63 targets, 465 yards, and 4 touchdowns. In his 2 seasons at Clemson, Jake Brennan he averaged 112 fantasy points, 75 targets, 514 yards, and 6 touchdowns. He's now gone, and there's an open competition for the starting job. Olsen Pat Henry was the tight end 2 in 2024, despite only having 11 targets. He sat out of spring camp as he's recovering from a shoulder injury. I cannot talk today. A shoulder injury, and won't have a chance to really kind of make his case for a starter until fall camp gets going. That opened the door for Josh Sapp. and he was the only other tight end to receive multiple receptions last season, of which he had 6. He had as many targets as Olsen Pat Henry last year, but he failed to
Mhm.
reach the end zone where Henry was able to score 3 times. Jeremy, do you have a favorite in this position battle?
Yeah, I think even with the injury, and again, we have to dig in further and make sure it doesn't linger in the fall. We've got plenty of time to sort through that, unless you're in these early drafts. But I think Henry really stands out. Even though they had the same amount of targets, one thing stood out when I was digging into this, which was, even though Henry was kind of the second fiddle to Brennan, he still played 300 snaps or 300 plus snaps. And when you compare that, Sap was only in the low 100s. I believe it was in the 111, 120, something like that. So, if you're just looking at maybe who the coaches favored, last year as the true number two, they both had 11 targets, but the fact that he was on the field for 300 snaps, seems pretty significant. That's an average of nearly 30 a game, which is close to 50% of the time they had him out there for one reason or another. And we know why he didn't get the targets, because they had another better tight end. But I think there's a clear distinction in terms of like who the coaches might put their faith in, based on how often he actually saw the field, even though he wasn't getting the targets, last year. So I would give him the big advantage this season.
Yeah, I'm leaning Henry pretty hard as well here. It just seems like that is the more talented guy, just like we saw in his utilization last year. They were willing to throw him the ball in the red zone. That stands out to me a lot.
Right.
Um, when I kind of look over Brennan, he was getting about 75 targets his last 2 years.
Right.
We know this Clemson offense is going to be throwing the ball a lot. I do think they might throw it a little more this year. I'm curious, what do you think? And this is an unscripted question here, but like, do you
Yeah.
think Henry like is like how would you gauge his ability to hit 70 targets? Do you think it's safe? Do you think it's 50-50? Do you think it might be an uphill challenge? Because again, there's a ton of pass catchers in this offense.
Right. Yeah, I'd say probably 50-50. I don't necessarily think it'll be a position that they rely on. And if I remember, actually, I do remember, they had a lot of really young, good wide receivers
Hmm.
last year that should really emerge even more this year,
Hmm.
along with, I think, Antonio Williams coming back. So I think the tight end gets neglected a little bit. Maybe they're used more, for run situations, their blocking ability. If Henry was in on that many snaps and didn't get that many targets, he's clearly, a guy they lean on for blocking, I would assume. So, I think he's probably more of a 60 target guy, 4 or 5 targets a game. Uh, and it's just a matter of how he converts that. I can't say I know how athletic he is or any of that, but
Hmm.
um, there's another redshirt freshman also that's coming up who played in only 4 games last year, so they made sure that they preserved the red shirt, which is uh, Bentancur, Bentancur, and he was a consensus top 125 player coming out of high school. So I think a guy like that, who they purposely redshirted to make sure they maintained as much eligibility as possible, could be, a guy that could eat into that. And the reason he doesn't quite get to 70, maybe even more than Sap, from what I was looking at, because he wasn't a top 125 tight end. He was a consensus top 125 player, in the 24/7 comp. So that means, you've got a heck of an athlete sitting there who was like tight end 4 last year that they just didn't play because they wanted to preserve his eligibility.
It's a good name to tuck away, and I'm with you. When I look at Henry as a tight end one, I'm going to guesstimate somewhere in that 55 to 65 target range. Is about
Yeah.
what I'm guessing. I have not done his projection yet, but if
Yeah.
I just off the cuff, that was probably looking at a little bit of a downgrade. I think it with as much as I see them passing, I think it would be hard for him not to get 55.
Yeah, and like random guys in that range I'm looking at, Michael Trigg had 50 targets, 30 catches, 3 touchdowns last year, and he was tight end 34. So, he's definitely not going to make our top 24, which is kind of your golden group of tight ends there that take you into too deep as far as roster worthy guys. But maybe he's probably a top 40 guy just based on the history at that position and the fact that, it is a team that's focused on tight ends a little bit more. You give him that benefit of the doubt,
Mhm.
but I don't think you need to draft the guy as one of your 2 tight ends if you're in a regular size league.
I'm going to transition us to the number 14 coaching system. We have Steve Sarkisian, the head coach at Texas. Players to watch are
Yep.
Jordan Washington, Spencer Shannon, and Nick Townsend. Over the last 3 seasons, Steve Sarkisian has fielded some great fantasy tight ends. He would rank higher on this list if his career average wasn't being weighed down by the 2019 through 2021 seasons. One of those was over at Texas, but really wasn't until 2022 that he started utilizing the tight end. Over these last 3 seasons, his tight end one is averaging 124 fantasy points, 74 targets, 53 receptions, 693 yards, and 4.6 touchdowns per season. QB Arch Manning is taking over the quarterback position, and we can expect a bump in the passing efficiency numbers, in my opinion. The tight end position is open this year, with young, unproven players vying for the starting job. Beat writers are pegging Jordan Washington and Spencer Shannon as the favorites in this position battle. Neither of them has caught a pass in college. That's one important thing to kind of throw out there. Spencer Shannon has the most game experience, playing in 15 games last season. He does have a big 6'7" frame. Jordan Washington only played in 3 games last season. He also injured his shoulder in spring camp and was forced to sit out the remainder of the practices. I'll also bring up Nick Townsend, who I mentioned earlier. He's a talented true freshman that could work his way into the conversation. With all the uncertainty surrounding this position battle, are you willing to take a chance on one of these guys in your fantasy drafts before fall camp?
Not the 2 that you've mentioned that have been on the roster. I'm going with the wild card, and only in a dynasty league if I take anybody from the Texas tight end room. We really like the Townsend kid. We have a series where we publish the players we think will be most likely to play early, meaning this year, 2025, or their redshirt freshman or sophomore year in 2026. And we look at who's left, for the NFL, who their best competition will be. And with the guys on this roster having 0 targets, and, they had been around a couple of years, except for Washington, who's, going to be a redshirt freshman. We felt like the door was wide open for Townsend to come in and be one of the 10 tight ends. We only had 10 on the list. We felt like he was one of the 10 tight ends that can come in as a true freshman and actually win some playing time. But that said, we wouldn't take him either as one of our 2 tight ends in a regular sized league. None of these guys, I think, make our top 40. We would truly be projecting Townsend as a dynasty, a stud dynasty tight end that might, get you some benefits next year in 2026 more than he even would here in 2025.
What I'm hearing from you is you think it'll kind of just be a big shuffling of players throughout this year where, maybe one guy's getting more reps at one part of the season, then like as the season goes on, maybe Nick Townsend's role's expanding. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, or again, we've got Washington, who was, the 24th best tight end in the class of 24. Texas is always going to have talent pushing, guys, or I guess they'll over recruit you, the term. They're always over recruiting the guys they already have. So I think you're really looking at the 2 young guys as your options, and you're not going to know enough to want to draft anybody in these drafts that even go through July. You got to really wait and see what things are looking like at the end of August if you're having drafts that late before you get a grip. And again, if we're looking at 24 to 35 tight ends being draft worthy, I don't see any of these guys, any of the 4, being draft worthy, being top 35 or top 40 guys, really.
Well, and that's why I characterize that question as before fall camp. When we start getting more definite word, I, on the one hand, am willing to take a shot on Washington or Shannon or Townsend in a best ball league. And there's so much turnover at tight end this year. Last year, I think I would typically do 7 quarterbacks and 3 tight ends. This year, because the quarterback position is so much more established, I'm going into best ball drafts doing 6 quarterbacks and 4 tight ends this year. So with that 4th pick, I don't mind taking an upside chance on someone. And so the reason why I say I don't mind maybe taking a shot on these guys in best ball is I'm leaving myself that extra spot to try and get someone with upside And we know this system is very productive. So if I'm going to take
Yeah.
a risk on someone, I think the system is worth investing in. But I agree
Right.
with you. Like we really don't know a whole lot um,
Yeah.
before
Yeah. One of
before
these
fall
guys
camp.
could have, yeah, one of these guys could be a huge stud that
Mm,
you're in a bidding war in week 3 to get that, ended up with 7 or 8 targets in weeks 1 or 2 that were totally unexpected. But, yeah, because they've got the talent. So it's not a matter of, these guys not being talented. It's just we don't really have a clue which one's going to, catch the quarterback in the coach's eye,
oh,
to get those
exactly.
targets. Yeah. So,
Okay.
um, but maybe as a tight end 3 in a best ball, you're right. You take a chance on one of them.
Well, and I'm thinking tight end four is really where I'm thinking. Like I'm, like I'll wait for if I'm going to take a shot on one of these guys, tight end four, and maybe, and especially in
Yeah.
early drafts, I say this all the time. I'm really trying to spread my wealth and just draft a little bit of everyone, not trying to
Yep.
plant my flag on people and draft them over and over again. So
Yep.
even if I was, going after one of these Texas guys, which I very well could do, I could take
Mhm.
one of them in 3 straight drafts as my tight end four, but just drafting a different one.
Right. And that makes sense because then that puts them at a value of kind of tight end 40 to 48. You got to assume there's a good chance a Texas tight end will be in the top 50. So that's not a
Mhm.
bad move, taking them in the right spot in that best ball at the very end. So,
All right, our number 13 coaching system today is Brent Brennan, the head coach at Arizona. Player to keep an eye on is Sam Olson. Brent Brennan makes this list because of the gaudy numbers his tight ends put up in 2018 and 2021. During those
mhm.
years, his tight end ones averaged 121 fantasy points, 96 targets, 51 receptions for 719 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Since 2021, we've not seen any production come close to those numbers. Sam
Right.
Olson has been playing for Brennan since 2021, so he is very familiar with this offensive system. That familiarity hasn't garnered fantasy success, with Olson's best season being 2023 when he scored 66 fantasy points. Last season at Arizona, he was splitting time with Keem Burnett, who's no longer on with the program this year. If you combine both of these tight ends stats from 2024 and mush them together.
Mhm.
That combined tight end one position would be 90 fantasy points, 31 receptions, 413 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Um, do you think year two at Arizona could bring fantasy relevance for Sam Olson, or are we going to continue to see these floundering numbers that we've been seeing since 2022?
Yeah, I think I've tried to champion Olsen, then I've switched to Mizzotti when they were both at San Jose State. I've tried to figure out which one of those guys was going to win the battle. Um, thought with Olsen following his coach to Arizona that he might see more success last year. It didn't happen, so I'm a little down on him compared to where I used to be, thinking he was going to kind of break out and be one of those top 15 guys that average 10 points a season. Um, but you did some of the math there and said, hey, if you double the targets, because the other guy is gone, and if you just give all of those targets to Sam Olson, he's still going to end up at about 60 targets, which doesn't make him a guy you necessarily want to go out and make your tight end one, certainly. And he's a stretch as a tight end two. I would
Mm,
say he's right on the cusp of a guy you might take it tight end two because he does have familiarity with the system. He's this coach clearly, trust him. Yeah, he brought him in when he made the move from San Jose State. But it scares me that even if you double his numbers from last year, he's 8.2 points a game, and that still makes him a tight end 33 or 34.
mm. And that's a
Which
best case
again,
scenario.
yeah, that could be the best case scenario, which makes him I think a great tight end three option and a big stretch as a tight end two option.
Mm,
The only thing that could shift that is, they brought in a couple of transfers at receivers, but they're also good transfers. You got Luke Weissong and Chris Hudson there. Tet McMillan is gone, so maybe that opens up the window for the tight ends to be looked at a little bit more. But they went out and got some good guys to replace one guy. So I think they're still spreading it out. They're probably spreading it out even more than they did last year since McMillan was there. But as much as I've rooted for him and thought he was going to break out in the past, I think he'll be a good tight end, but not necessarily a roster worthy tight end in
mm-hmm.
leagues where you're carrying two. He's only there as a good tight end 3 option, and leagues that are really deep, or even those leagues where you start 2 tight ends in some cases, those rare leagues that might start 2 tight ends. He'd be a great guy as that second starting tight end, but you're not putting him in as your potential tight end 1 in any scenario at this point, I don't think.
No, and you know, Brent and Brennan, he makes this list because of the 2018 and 2021 numbers where his tight ends are scoring over, in the 120 fantasy points and up. My
Right.
attitude as I'm looking at this system is I'm ignoring Sam Olson this year. I'm
Hmm.
taking an approach of, hey, Brent, show me you're going to throw to the tight end again before I start believing it.
Right.
And,
Right.
and really, I'm going to say this: if he continues to have guys who are scoring, you know, 50, 60 fantasy points at tight end after this year's done, I probably am not even going to put him in my top 15 next year. I'm just going to ignore
Right. Right.
those fantasy numbers. But so that's kind of the attitude I'm taking. Is I don't see any way I would draft him. Not even in a best ball format where it's a dart throw as a tight end for like, well, maybe he pops off.
Yeah.
I'm just viewing him as pure Olson purely as a I'm in a redraft league. I might put him on my watch list as the season gets
Right.
going to be a waiver wire pickup, but at best, that's how I'm viewing Sam Olson.
Right, right. Okay. And then so we're a little bit different there. We're both saying don't go grab him in a regular size league, but I'm saying whereas you might take the Texas guy in best balls and I wasn't, so keen on it, I might take Olsen in the best ball as the tight end 3 and certainly a tight end 4 in that scenario. So
Mhm.
I think there's a slither of potential there to get a few more carries with catch targets with McMillan gone. So
All right. Our number
there you
12
have it.
coaching system is Sherrone Moore, head coach at Michigan. Players that we are going to watch are Marlon Clean and Hogan Hansen. Michigan has been a frequent stop for fantasy owners looking for tight ends during the Moore era. Uh, his career average stats for tight end ones is 94 fantasy points, 62 targets, 44 receptions, 522 yards, and 4 touchdowns per season over the past 2 years with Colston Loveland as the tight end, the fantasy production
Hmm.
has soared. Loveland is gone to the NFL, and new unproven players are battling to get a piece of that pie. I don't
Hmm.
think it's likely that the winner of this position battle will match Loveland's production.
Hmm.
Marlon Klein, he's the most experienced player in this battle. He's played in 25 games in his career. Last season, he pulled in 13 receptions, 108 yards for 8.3 yards per reception, but no touchdowns.
Hmm.
Hogan Hansen, who I covered, I think it was all the way back in February when I was going through burning questions for the season. I was kind of talking about Hansen as if he's the tight end 1.
Hmm.
He is the more athletic of the two.
Right.
He played in 10 games last year. He had 7 receptions for 78 yards. The one big difference I see, he had 11.1 yards per reception, and he did get 1 touchdown. Jeremy, do you see one of these guys being the guy this season, or does the offense split the tight end production between the two of them?
Yeah, I think they split the production. Michigan is a team that you traditionally we haven't kind of looked for wide receivers, and we've looked more at the opportunity for running backs and tight ends. However, um, we're kind of in that situation we've been in with a couple of these teams we've already talked about, where we don't know enough coming out of spring yet who will be the target. So you're going to kind of have to play the wait and see game to make things more interesting. They've got a third tight end that they're using as an H back or a fullback hybrid, Bredson, who, from what I was reading, could steal targets also from the true tight ends. They're going to, put this guy in there as an H back and even out of the backfield and be throwing the ball to him a little bit. So we've got Chip Lindsey also from North Carolina now. Where people are assuming that they're going to be more pass happy was the quote that I took from the article. But while he's also had success with tight ends, it's clearly been split wherever he's been. The last couple of years in North Carolina, there's not really any one tight end there that you could put all of your faith in. You had
Mm-hmm.
Nesbitt and other guys there that were splitting targets. So While I think the tight ends overall will see a lot of action at Michigan, as they always have, I think with Lindsey's track record more than anything, it's going to be really divided in terms of how he utilizes them. And, he'll have key guys in certain scenarios, and you're not going to see a guy on the field just getting all the targets like Loveland did from that
Mhm.
position.
Yeah, I think they probably will do some form of a split. I wouldn't be surprised. The numbers that we have on the screen from 2022 and 2021, the
Hmm.
tight ends were getting 48 and 54 targets. I wouldn't be
Right.
surprised if the tight end one is maybe in that range, where the
Right.
tight end two is in like the mid 20 range.
Yeah.
I think maybe you could see something like that sort of a split. I do
Right.
like, just like the Texas system. I just think this is a system where year in and year out you do see fantasy value,
Hmm.
and so I'm willing to take shots on these Michigan guys. I'm even recommending that this might be a position worth handcuffing, since we don't know yet kind of who the guy is. But one thing I do like with a best ball league is, once again, as I mentioned, I'm taking the approach of drafting four tight ends this year. So I do have enough flexibility if I handcuffed this position and drafted both Klein and Hansen, that I still could have two other tight ends on my roster.
Right.
Or I like an approach of wait until, it just depends on how early you want to draft your tight end too, or if you're going to wait till way later. But I was going to say, if you, maybe tight end two, if you're not
Hmm.
drafting them too early, but definitely by tight end three, maybe you just take whichever of these two guys is still around. Take the guy at the
Right.
discount, hoping he maybe becomes the guy, but you've at least got one, maybe two tight ends above them that you feel like you can count on better production for. I think that would be my approach as for looking at these Michigan tight ends in a best ball draft.
Right. And I agree in a best ball. I think I would focus in more on Hansen than anybody. I agree with
Hmm.
you that Hansen has way more upside. I mean, he was a true freshman last year that played in the 10 games, 9 of those during the regular season. Um, the fact that that's kind of a tell from coaches too. The fact that they didn't want to hold him and just limit him to 4 games, and he was useful enough to burn a red shirt. Tells you that they've got some belief that he's going to be a player. Otherwise,
Hmm.
they wouldn't have wasted their time putting him in that 5th game and burning the red shirt. So um, I think I would gamble on Hansen for sure in a best ball,
Yeah.
because even if they're splitting targets, best ball is all about just having one guy be really hot that week. And Hansen seems to be a guy that's athletic enough to, turn out a 15 or 20 point game a couple times a
Hmm.
season, which is all you need from your tight ends in a best ball. I agree with you that Hansen's a guy to watch with the most upside. And if you can get him in dynasty leagues, that's a no brainer, to draft a guy that young compared to Klein, who's a senior. And that's also a little bit of a tell. He's a senior who hasn't played that much. So what is that telling you about his upside? He might have reached it already. So we'll find out.
Yeah, and we mentioned Hanson's the most athletic of the two.
Right.
There's a strategy I'm really starting to adopt with drafting tight ends that are in position battles, because a lot of times, even when fall camp's around, you may not
Mhm.
hear who the winner of that is until late in fall camp. So there's a lot of times where you're going to be drafting a tight end that we still don't know exactly who the tight end one is, and sometimes what you might have is, and I think Michigan's this way. Klein's not purely a blocking tight end, but
Mhm.
Klein's the older guy who's more experienced, maybe a little more just an overall talent level ready for the
Mhm.
for the games than a younger guy. But maybe that younger guy is more athletic. He's the
Right.
guy who can make more plays. You know, once the ball gets in his hands, and if anytime there's that scenario where you have a guy who's maybe a little bit more blocking based and another guy who's a little more receiving based, I'm just going to bet on the one who's a receiver. I'm going to ignore
Right.
past experience, which normally I do follow quite a bit. Like guys who are
Mhm.
more experienced tend to win out some of these battles, but I think at the tight end position, um, you're I'd rather draft for the high ceiling, and if I strike out, I strike out. And I,
Right.
I like that approach, whether it's best ball, redraft, um, and I think this works really well into dynasty or campus to Canton, because those guys that are more the pass catchers are typically just going to be the overall better athletes and the better guys to hang on to. So that's something that think will fit a lot of these teams. So I'm
Yep.
right there with you. Like if I'm picking one guy that I kind of want to hang my hat on,
Hmm.
here I would say I would go after Hansen because I just think he's the better pass catcher of the two.
Yeah, he's worth a dice roll for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Our
So,
last coaching system for the preview show here is number 11, Jeff Nixon, the offensive coordinator at Syracuse. Players to watch are Dan Villari and Jamie Tremble. I hate to say this, guys, all of you watching here, but we can't really take anything from Jeff Nixon's coaching history here to help us for 2025. I know this show is all about looking at the coach's history, and you've got 3 years of history there on the screen for you to look at. Um, but I'll kind of go through my thought process why and I'm really not liking trying to project this position this year. But I'll
hmm
go through this thought process why say I don't think we can use any of this history to help us out. From 2018 to 2019 at Baylor, the tight end position for him was an afterthought, and you see 9 and 11 targets. That's terrible. I mean, there's some like Minnesota probably throws the ball to their fullback more than Baylor threw to their tight end in those years. Last season at Syracuse, we saw the amazingly gifted Aronde Gadsden, who was a true tight end in name only, a Tino. And Gadsden was utilized as a wide receiver in the offense due to his natural athletic ability and route running skills. He's gone to the NFL, and we now have to guess at what a normal tight end will do in this offensive system. Because this history that we look at, you're looking at the absolute bottom of the floor and the absolute top of the ceiling of what a tight end could do for Jeff Nixon. We need to try and figure out what's most likely that a tight end will do this year.
right.
And so, I mean, you kind of are just grabbing numbers out of thin air, trying to guess, I think. When looking at the guys here for this year, Dan Villari is the most experienced player returning. He's played in 39 career games, and in 2013, he did score 111 fantasy points. So he has shown us that he can be productive. An arm injury has kept him limited in the spring, meaning we won't get any real insight on the position battle until he returns to full action in fall camp. After Villari, it's the great unknown with this tight end room.
Hmm.
Jamie Tremble looks to be the best of what's left, and that's about the best way I can word it. He did play
Yeah.
in 11 games last year, but he only had one reception. So, me trying to find a second name to throw out there, guys, like I'm having to go that deep into the bag, pulling Tremble out here.
Yeah.
Considering we don't have a good basis to project this season's tight end production on, are you still willing to draft a Syracuse tight end, or are you just going to stay away this offseason?
Yeah. And again, I think this one comes down to what kind of league you're in, what you're drafting for.
Mm-hmm.
I literally had a note that I totally erased after I dug deeper, which was I'm just staying away, period. But then again, you turn to the second page of your Google search and you find more articles and more things on YouTube. And I found a couple reporters that are the local beat guys they're the ones you have to put your faith in because they're going
Mm-hmm.
to look a lot deeper than we do. And we've just kind of got to filter the information from them that really, really, really like Jamie Trimble as an athlete and the breakout player. Specifically, give him credit, Locked on Syracuse, the reporter there that runs that account on YouTube, said he's locked in at tight end one and is his prediction for the breakout star of the team.
Interesting.
Um, we know they just lost Pena this week to the portal, their number one receiver. So he's kind of moved from me having in my notes. I'm not going to mess with the tight end from Syracuse because Villari's numbers from a couple years ago are a little bit fluky. He had some quarterback stats in there that
Mm-hmm.
boosted his point total when they were just horrendous, but he was still kind of passing and running at the quarterback position. Um, but there were not. It wasn't just the Locked on Syracuse guy that mentioned Trimble, and then looking back, then you start working backwards. He had 160 catches in high school. He's still on their roster listed at only 208 pounds. So if he gets into fan tracks as a tight end, I mean, he's clearly a wide receiver body at 6'4", 208.
Mm-hmm.
I think all the services were projecting him to grow into a tight end, which he may not even really have done. So you might be looking at a true replication of Gadsden in terms of, a back-to-back Tino here for Syracuse, which would play wonderfully into fantasy owners' hands. So he's not only a guy I definitely take a gamble in best ball at that third tight end spot, but even in kind of regular leagues with 12 owners, he might work his way into our top 30 and maybe even the top 25 with some projecting there from kind of the end of spring reports that we started seeing. Because when local guys start saying he's their breakout candidate for the offense, I think you got to at least have an open mind there that they've seen these guys more than anybody, and they got to know a little bit about what they're talking about.
Yeah, I know a lot in the there's a number of people in the CFF analysts uh, arena here that are really locking in on Valari. They love him. I had not heard
Yeah,
about the news about Tremble.
yeah,
And as I mentioned earlier, like because Valari was having a missed time with an injury this spring, we
yeah.
really don't know how that's going to look until he comes back. Tremble
Right,
might be hands down, like I said, he's the best of what's left.
right,
After Valari, where like he could look head and shoulders above, and then Valari could come in and just steal the job away. We don't know yet. Um,
right.
I'm with you. I think probably both of these guys, unless you're drafting in late August and we start having news from fall camp. But assuming we
Hmm.
don't, they're probably going to be guys I would put on a watch list, keep my eye
Hmm.
out for waiver wire in redraft leagues. If what you mentioned with Tremble, I think he
Hmm.
could be great as a tight end four in a best ball. This is
Yep.
another reason why I like doing my strategy for this year for best balls is take him four. It gives me flexibility to take upside shots. And right now, I guarantee you he's probably going for free in best ball drafts. So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
could just make
Exactly.
him that last tight end target. Um, so that's one thing that I do like about him, where Valari's going to be going for a much higher price. I'm going to guess probably somewhere in the middle third of a draft might
Right.
be where he's going. So, you know, uh, with that news about Tremble, that does open me up a little bit, but I still think with either one of these guys,
Hmm.
as of right now, without news from fall camp, I'm thinking tight end four at best. A dart throw guy. Um,
Yep.
that's kind of where I'm looking at it.
Yep. Yep. And again, I think you can't go wrong taking a gamble at tight end three here. And if I start seeing more articles like the ones that I found, if guys around that 20 tight end 2021 range end up gone before I can grab him as my confident tight end two, then
Hmm.
he is a guy that I think I might slip into a true tight end two in a regular draft for me. So I will we'll
And
keep an eye on him.
you look at this target range that we have on the screen. I'm just going to say you have a low of 10 and a high of 110. I'm rounding these off.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a pretty good variance there.
but let's just say someone lands in the middle, 55 targets.
Yeah,
And let's just say maybe that's a floor. In the middle, we just might think might be a rough but not too bad floor. I'm willing to take a risk on that. Late in the
right.
draft, like I said, a tight end four, I think that's worth it because there is upside, but I
Right.
don't think there's any way a tight end's going to get more than 75 targets this year. Like
Yeah,
I think they'd really have to be depleted or a bunch of injuries for that to happen.
right, right.
I want to thank everybody for watching the CFF Coaching Systems High Volume Tight Ends preview show here on the Let Purple Rain podcast. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. This is the final episode of a 7-part series on the CFF Coaching Systems, the invaluable tool for your CFF drafts. You go back to letpurplerain.com and find all of my 7 parts of this series. I have links in the description below here on YouTube as well that you can use to get to each and every one of those articles. And, Jeremy here was the final amazing guest that I've had on this podcast series. So, I really want to thank you for coming on here today. You can find his work at CFFLists. You can find his podcast at YouTube at CFFLists. And you can follow him on X at the handle that you see on the screen. Jeremy, go ahead and tell everybody about what you have planned for May and the rest of 2025.
Yeah, we do similar series as you, so we're a little behind on this one. So we'll probably be using you for some of our homework on the coaching changes series. We're going to start that up next week. That'll run we kind of do we like to break things down by conference just to make it more simple to kind of dig in. So we'll be looking at the coaching changes by conference between April 22nd through like that first week of May over kind of a 2-week period. But instead of just letting you know who changed jobs, we put our 2 cents in on whether teams will be better or worse in the passing game and the running game. So we list their previous seasons, yards per game ranking for that team, and if this coach should improve that or make it worse, so that at least you kind of have an at a glance chart to say, okay, Coach X moved to team X. They used to throw the hell out of the ball, but what's going to happen now? And that guy might be a totally different coach. So we just don't want you to get fooled by a team's history when really it's the coaches at that team that you got to look at a lot more closely. We've talked about the fact that, Michigan's had a great tight end history. Well, that may not mean anything if they bring in a different type of coach. This year, it looks like they brought in a coach where that might stay the same. But, again, putting that prediction in there on whether we think they'll do slightly better, slightly worse, way better, way worse, gives you a little bit of, like I said, an at-a-glance guide to look at. From there, we get into the tough task of the post-spring transfer updates,
Yes.
which hopefully by May 13th is all settled. I think there's like a 2-week window once this thing opened up, this week in mid-April. So things should be settled once and for all as far as who's transferred where. So we'll kind of finish May off discussing that.
You do think it should be by the middle. I'm being cautious, and that's why I mentioned earlier in the show. I'm going to wait till the very last thing I put out in May is going to be a recap of that, just in case there's still like some late signing guys.
Yeah.
But so far, would you agree with me what we've been seeing with the spring portal? Guys seem to be signing very quickly, or at least the top names are.
Oh yeah, what that makes me think is somebody's gotten in there and said, hey, we got a great deal for you if you just jump in the portal and make a quick commitment to us. We got you covered. So there's clearly a lot of talks going on with players before they enter the portal, which is the one thing, even though there seem to be no rules, that seems to be the one rule that you're not supposed to break, is talking to players before they're in the portal. But the quickness with which guys are committing after they enter the portal indicates that they're definitely getting wooed behind the scenes and encouraged to jump into the portal for a few bucks. So, but we're not far from you. We're not going to start that until the middle of May, kind of run that through the 20s in May. And then we'll wrap it up as far as the off-season stuff with our position battle updates. I know you retweeted just about every one that we put out about 2 weeks ago. Over the last 3 weeks, really, we've been kind of putting out the key position battles to watch by conference. We know there may be 30 battles in every conference, because of guys that have left, this, that, and the other. We've tried to whittle that down to really the top 10 or 12 battles that are going to be the most CFF relevant. So we go in, we use the same graphic. We circle a winner in green if we know he's won. We put it in yellow if we think he's the favorite, but he made some progress and maybe it's not down to 3 guys, it's down to 2 now. So we'll just update those graphics and let you know kind of, which players, from those battles could help you the most. And then, that covers June, and we jump into ratings in July. We know a lot of people are drafting by August, so we try to get all the, the positional ratings out, overall and by conference, by the end of July, so everybody can have those. And it seems like besides best balls, the bulk of leagues are drafting sometime in August. So, we want you to have a complete chart ready for that. So all of those are, public in terms of what we release, and they're pretty extensive once you start digging into the conference level rankings that we put out. So, even if we've only given you the top 24 tight ends, you can kind of be a little smart about it and look at our conference ratings, and you end up with really, our true top 60 tight ends, at the end of the day by breaking it down that way. But that's it, kind of classic off-season work rolling into the real rankings in July.
Yeah, and one thing I've witnessed over all this time I've been doing CFF work, the wave, and I call it the wave because it really does feel like a tsunami wave of people that, hey, let me log back into college fantasy football. Let me start reading articles. Let me start, like the biggest bulk of people, that tsunami comes um, right around 4th of July weekend
Yeah.
every
Yep.
year. And so like that's always been that thing of like, you need to make sure if you're putting out content, you've got certain things in place by 4th of
Yeah.
July. That's just a
Yep.
rule I've learned. Like don't break it. And I know for myself, my draft guide, which is going to have rankings, projections, everything, that will be out by the end of June. So I'm even going to get a head
Nice.
start on that.
Nice. That's great. And I think what you said has really been triggered traditionally when it was the only resource
Hmm.
where,
The
the,
magazines.
the magazines,
Yep.
you had Athlons, you had Lindy's, you had
Phil
everyone.
Steele.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shout
Phil
out
Steele.
Phil.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. The deepest guy in the game. But yeah, they were all coming out right at the end of June and certainly by 4th of July
Hmm.
weekend. And that kind of always was the stake in the ground to say, hey, it's almost time for football. So, we'll be right there along with you.
I also want to throw out, if you do like magazines, I want to throw out Athlon. My buddy Steven Lassen over there at Athlon, a longtime friend, and partner in the industry. If you do like buying magazines, check out Athlons as well. I want to
Yep.
thank everybody here for reading and watching at letpurplerain.com and here on YouTube. You guys are the reason that I can keep doing this work, and your support goes a long way in helping me continue to give you guys this great content. I want to give a special thank you to one of my newest subs, but one of my oldest CFF friends, Rebel Nut. He is one of the founding members of the home league that I run, and I have been running since 2010. He took advantage of my 30% discount for annual premium subscriptions. Uh, Anyone that signs up and is a premium sub will automatically be entered into those golden ticket giveaways for the Battle for the Belt 52-man league challenge. And you're going to have all this amazing content coming up. I did mention the end of June is when I'm going to have my draft guide out, and I'm going to be putting out the biggest, best draft guide I've ever put out, going all the way back to 2008. I'm busting my buns for you guys on that one, but I think you guys are going to be really pleased with the amount of work I put into that for you guys. Once again, please like and subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, check out the rest of my fantasy draft prep videos. You're going to find a link that you can click on at the end of this video here. Thanks for joining the Let Purple Rain podcast. Your CFF reign starts here.